Thank you. So, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining our Finding and Winning Tender workshop. Public procurement in Ireland is worth an estimated 17 billion euros. So that's obviously quite a lot in terms of opportunities for businesses in Donegal and beyond. And that's across a wide range of sectors, products and services. The national tendering platform eTenders changed on the 15th of May of this year, with new competitions now published on the platform since the 22nd of May. So our workshop for existing users will provide you detail on how to re-input your details as well as your additional details and activate your account on the new platform. If you are new to eTenders, you'll learn a range of things such as registering to apply for tenders and receive alerts when a new tender is published. And for all users, we'll provide training on how to read a tender, break it down into relevant parts, develop a winning tender for those that best suit your business, how tenders are assessed, and ensure your tender meets those requirements, compiling your bid, understanding best practice, and our trainer today, Gordon, will provide tips and pointers on how to write an effective tender. And following the workshop, you will have a framework to allow you to make bids straight away. I'll shortly hand you over to Gordon, who'll lead the workshop for the next 3 hours or so. Gordon McArdle provides training, consultancy, and coaching for business owners and managers in leadership, sales, and marketing, tendering, and public procurement. He's over 15 years senior management experience in large companies before setting up Rockus Training and Business Development in 2015. He now works with numerous bodies and private companies, providing expert services geared towards business growth. And lastly, before I hand over, as a Monaghan man, I've asked him if he can provide some assistance in helping Donegal win against Monaghan on Saturday, but sadly he hasn't been able to commit to that one. So we'll have to go that one alone.
Stephen, I think you're more than capable, and Monaghan have enough to be up against without, not that I'd know anything anyway, so it's a tightly run ship. So thanks very much. And for everyone, for those who have come along so far, I think we have a few more registered, so chances are normal enough here that people might come along as to go. And then, as Stephen said, we've quite a bit to do because normally in this workshop, we're going to look at how eTenders works, and we look at how it breaks down. And for some people, that can be a bit daunting, the whole idea of tenders, and especially when you look at the platform and eTenders and everything that's involved in it. And then about a month ago, it changed. It switched over from the old platform to the new platform, and that means a few things. It's not too bad. The switchover is pretty straightforward, and in fact, it's very straightforward. And there's really, once the switchover is done, there's one key thing that we have to do to ensure that we're live and we're getting everything that we need. And in addition to that, or say on from the technical or the practical thing of being on eTenders and being able to work with it, we're going to have also then what happens with a tender. So for you, like me, doing tenders, looking at tenders, if you take it from the beginning to the end, it in itself is a relatively onerous process. Even if it's a small tender, say with a local authority or with a local enterprise office, where the tenders are relatively straightforward, and to be fair, they're not difficult to do. Even those ones are time consuming. There's quite a bit to it and all that. And when you go into bigger tenders, bigger type jobs, where there are more technical aspects that have to be answered, there are more components to the tender to be handled, then it gets even a wee bit more complex. And often it's from the start, it becomes a bit challenging, even the looking at the tender and seeing what's involved and so on. And that can be a bit off-putting. But it's useful if it doesn't put us off, because it is an opportunity. And I'm just going to bring up some slides now, so I have some material that can help us. Bear with me for a second now. Now, so you should be able to see my screen now, which is PowerPoint slides, and we're going to switch over the duration of the morning. We're going to switch from some information on a slide deck on PowerPoint to some PDFs where we have information about switch over on how the tender platform works and so on. And then we're going to go in and look at the platform as well. And we're going to look at how to log in, what you need to do, how do you set up an account it could be completely new for you, for some people. And then how do we navigate the platform? And we go from navigating the platform into handling a tender and what's best practice in terms of answering a tender and trying to submit a winning bid. All right. So as Stephen said, Gordon McCarroll is my name. I live outside Carrick Cross in County Monaghan, so you shouldn't hold that against me, but that's where I am. And normally here we would get to know you a little bit. Without knowing an awful lot, the thing that's useful to know is in terms of who have we got, in terms of people who are completely new to it, who have we got who are already doing it, so you're already involved in tenders, or you're on the eTenders platform and you want to get switched over and maybe you want some help around specific things to do with tenders, so you have a wee bit of experience or whatever. And we might even have somebody or people who are very experienced at it or have been doing it a lot, but maybe aren't having a lot of success at it. So I think we're safe enough to find that out from you. That's all right. Would you throw into the chat for me, even if you're used to Zoom, where you're at in terms of your tender experience to date, whether you're brand new at it or whether you're experienced at it and you're looking around the switch over and what has to happen with the new platform as well? If you wouldn't mind firing that in for me. And if you want to come on and talk, take yourself off mute and I'll take you. And as long as you're not rude or anything like that, we can talk to you. I see you coming off mute, Andy. Go on ahead.
Can't get into the chat, so yeah.
Tell me.
So we're an online support service for schools, parents, and students. Predominantly, most of our work's been in China over the last 6 years, so we haven't really done a lot of tendering bids. We were based in the UK. I've had an Irish business registration for the last couple of years, and we're just starting to get going here now. So looking at potentially the ESL contracts that come out, for new settlers, newcomers to Ireland who need to learn English.
Right.
Any contracts that are on that we'd be interested in. But we've not really done a lot of tendering at the moment, but it's an area that we're looking at.
Okay, so it's new for you. Thank you. Yeah. Who else? The chat's not really. Did I disable the chat?
My name is Chris McCarthy. We're based in Donegal and we're northwest of Ireland, so we do security and fire. I do a lot of tendering from electrical contractors sent directly to ourselves, but we want to get more into us going out for the tenders ourselves without being approached.
So eTenders is kind of new for you.
It is new to it is. Yeah. We normally just get them sent directly from the electrical contractors to yourselves. So it's all
right. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, I had the chat disabled if anybody was trying to use it, but I've enabled it now. So if you wanted to use the chat, you could. It's gone okay so far. If you wouldn't mind giving me some more feedback, please, just so I know.
Yeah, Vincent Farley's my name. Done 2 tenders, both successful. Just technical market reports, but would like to have a company that's an ecotech company, and would like to bid for sustainable projects.
All right. So you're a bit familiar with the eTenders platform already.
Yeah, but it was just market consultancy stuff and marking of but this is always good to be aware of the pitfalls and how to do things properly.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Vincent. What about Miguel or Lynette or Makita?
I've got a fair idea of eTenders, but it's just to kind of get an insight just onto the new kind of platform, just to make sure that it's all right. Just
all right, very good. Thank you. Okay, so, okay, we're getting a bit of an idea. If I haven't heard from anybody, if you throw it into the chat now, it's enabled. You can tell me where you're at with it and what you know and don't know, and you knew, not new, you know, and it gives us. So it seems like we're going to have people who wouldn't be overly familiar with it, and so we can take it from that point of view. We're going to have to do that anyway, to make sure that anyone who isn't familiar with it knows what it is that we're talking about, right? So when another thing I should say is we will break a little. We'll take a little bit of time to break off and give you a break away from it. It is quite a long session, so, and there is quite a bit of information in it as well, right? So let's see how it goes, but we will break it up a wee bit. So Stephen mentioned at the start as well the opportunity that exists within public procurement, and this is probably a good way to look at it. I fall into this thing sometimes of looking at tenders and thinking, you know, tenders are a lot of work, there's a lot to do, bit of a pain, you know, that type of thing. But when you look at it as an opportunity, it's the public sector spend a lot of money procuring goods and services. And, you know, I think it's around 18 to 20 billion a year in Ireland. So that's a lot of money. That's a big market that's available. And obviously it's broken down into a whole load of sectors. But there are customers out there available for us as businesses that we can deal with. And the public procurement element of it it's a key element of the public service reform program. And it's about for them operating in a fair and transparent way and providing equal opportunities to suppliers. And also for them as procurers or buyers to get maximum value for money. So from our point of view as suppliers, that means we have this market that's available. We know that it's a market that's substantial. And we know that the principles that lie behind it are to encourage us to go into it, and that the process by which a decision is made is fair and transparent. So a criteria is set out at the beginning for what's expected, you know, so we're told as suppliers what we have to do, the information that we have to provide, what it is that the procurer is looking for. And so we're given the opportunity then to meet that, right, to answer that in a clear, concise, coherent way, even in a creative way as well. And that then allows us to win points on our bid. And if we win the most points, we win the bid. And so it's equal opportunity in that way. If we take it from the point of view of, say, right, if we take it from the point of view of, we make a comparison with, say, standard sales process, which is dealing privately with customers. We know that there are other factors that come into play there, and that's maybe a thing that we'll talk about as we go on. A rough breakdown is the public capital programme is about 10 billion, and the commercial semi-state sector spends about 8 billion. There are 3,000 contracting authorities across Ireland that spend about 15 billion a year. So you can see the scale of the market that's available by looking at these numbers. And these are massive numbers. I mean, for us as small or medium-sized businesses even, these are huge numbers. So if we look then at the sectors that are available, these are the key sectors. So if you're in construction or anything construction related, there's a lot of work on eTenders, and there's a lot of work in the public procurement sector for construction. Health and justice and education. So like what Andy's doing, you know, looking into the education sector or education support, like that's a big sector. Transport, utilities, and software and services. Now, these would be the key sectors that are where money is being spent or goods and services are being procured within. And then within these key sectors, you have all the little branch offs of all these, and we're going to see those in a while when we look at the CPV codes and we look at what all the different sectors or areas that are available for us to bid for. We'll have a look into that a bit later on. So when we compare the two, and you know, if you are generally in business and you're selling privately, which is a thing that I do a lot, we know that the private market is generally informal and it's lacking regulation in that there aren't necessarily rules or laws that are governing the way in which a company selects a supplier. You know, there would be internal processes and there'd be internal criteria being used in order to select suppliers, but they're very informal. And the other thing in the private sector is that we know that it's price sensitive generally, right? The price is a key element in the decision making as regards who gets the job or not. And not always, I mean, we know that there are ways around that, or there are ways of selling high value items. But another thing, and this is a really key difference between the two that you will know if you've been doing it, is pitching is a feature in the private sector. You know, where we sell privately, we make a pitch of some sort in order to, you know, convince somebody that we're the best person for the job or the best company for the job or whatever. Pitching takes on various forms, and included in that is relationship building, where, you know, we might get to know somebody and we have a connection with them, or you have a reputation in a way within the sector in which you're in, and that helps you then to make contacts and build networks and, you know, build relationships and so on. And this will always often be a key driver of whether or not you get business. So sales and selling is a huge part of private sector business and in getting business. And you know this and I know this. This is how it works. But when you move into the public sector, it's different in that it's a formal system based around rules and laws. That's it, right? We know that the public sector have to procure or buy under these rules, and they have to buy under these laws, and they have to act in a formal manner. And they have to use and they have to publish in advance what the decision-making criteria is for that. So we know in advance when we're making this bid, this formal bid, what decision-making criteria is being used to award the job. And we can tailor the bid in that way. We're not trying to guess. We're not trying to wonder what sort of form is the person in today? How's this going to go? What am I going to say? You know, when price comes up, how do I talk about it? You know, those things don't come into it. We're going to make formal decisions about the way in which the bid gets made, and we're going to submit that bid according to that. And we're going to submit it in a clever way, because we're going to look at the decision-making criteria in advance, and we're going to answer the bid to win maximum points according to that decision-making criteria. And that's in the third section of this morning. That's what we're going to look at. How do we do that? Do that really well. Another thing is there is no personal or informal communication allowed. So that doesn't mean that you can't make queries. There are ways in which to make queries. When queries are answered, those queries have to be answered to everybody. So if you make a query of the body that is procuring the goods or services, that query can be answered, but it should be answered then to everybody. So everybody knows the query was made and everybody sees what the answer is. And that's the rule around it, right? But it isn't the thing that we do the things in terms of relationship building that we would do in the private sector. We're not allowed to do that in public sector procurement. And also, the decision has to be made based on the tender that's submitted. So the public body, strictly speaking, they could know that you're really great, right? They could know that, you know, you have a reputation. They could know that your business is well known. They could know all sorts of things about you. But they have to make the decision based on the document that is submitted to them. That's the rule. They have laid out decision-making criteria in advance. You have submitted a bid to meet that and to win maximum points. And then they have to award the points on the basis of what they receive, right? So then that means it's based on the tender that's submitted. If you're a really good company, but you submit a crap tender, then according to the law, according to the rules, you can't get the job. If somebody submits a tender that's better written, that is more coherent, it's structured better, it's creative even in terms of its solutions or problem solving or what it can do, then it has to win compared to one that's written really badly by a good company, right? So in those terms, in the private sector, if something like that happened, a bad bid was submitted or a bad quote was submitted, a phone call might be made or something could be done, you know, like to look what's happening here. We all know that. In the public sector, that's not going to happen. Or it really shouldn't be happening. I mean, if it happens, it should not. So the key principles around tendering are, it's governed under the EU treaty. It's a process of accountability, right? So this means that the people, and this, I think this is an important factor or thing to remember about the people who are doing the buying, right? People who purchase things in the public sector are under intense scrutiny because they are accountable for there's a chance that they're going to be audited, good chance. The decisions that they made, there's a good chance that they will be questioned, at least as part of an audit or a check to see how was this done, right? Have they followed everything up front? If you take a body, and I would work with some companies and bodies who would get grants and who would then have to procure something, and I would help them with preparing the tender when they go to procure that thing that they're being given the money for. There really is a lot of rules and criteria around what they have to do. And so they have to then also keep all the paperwork, all the details of what they've done, the timelines and so on. They have to keep a procurement file, and that has to be available then for check to ensure that the money was spent properly. So that's record keeping is another part of it. Conflict of interest. So if there was a conflict of interest, you have to declare that conflict of interest. And again, this is a rule around it. And we do see some elements. Sometimes this throws up in the news or something because there can be a conflict of interest here and there that maybe wasn't declared, and that gets followed and that becomes a real problem. So you will see that this is a safeguard within it. Another key principle is following public financial procedures, right? So the management of the money within. There are codes of conducts. You are not allowed to accept gifts. And another thing that comes into it is collusive tendering, you know, so that you and I would get together and decide what we were going to do in terms of a bid. That's collusion. That wouldn't be allowed. And if that were to come up, you would lose the contract. So that's also against the principle and it's against the rules of tendering. So we can see from this that it's its own way of working, it's formal, it's strict. And in terms of its formality and its strictness, this is good for us as suppliers in that we go into the tender knowing that we're working on an equal footing. So we tender under these rules. It's equal treatment, it's transparent. Decisions made are made on the document that are submitted and the scoring system that's provided. And contracts over 25,000 generally have to go to public tenders. They have to go on eTenders. You'll find a lot of tenders over around 5,000 will be on eTenders. And there are some reasons for that, but one of them is because of the rules that people doing procurement have to follow, then it's easiest to do that if you put it on eTenders because you tick so many of the boxes that you have to tick as the buyer, you know, like public notice, seeking enough qualified bids, you know, that's a thing that they have to do. So there's no better place to put it than up on eTenders in order to ensure that you get the right number of bids in. So often they will have to have 3 bids or 5 bids or something like that. And this way is the best way to do it. So you'll generally see over 5,000. You'll see a lot over 5,000. If it's over 25,000, generally it has to go on there. There are a couple of exceptions to that in terms of works contracts. So that could be like over 50,000 under the national procurement guidelines. And if it's leader funding for a works contract, it may not have to go up in eTenders unless it's over 100. We look at those details as we go through here, but they're generally right. So types of tenders. Now I know this is a lot of information, and at any point I could say something that might trigger a question or a thought. It seems like we have a good group here. So if at any point you have a question or thought, or you want to come in, I'm gonna I'm going to for now allow people to unmute themselves if you want. So if at any point just come in, because I am going to be doing a lot of talking, and you might find that it's a wee bit too much information in one go at times. So don't be afraid to come in and interrupt me. Okay, so what are the types of tenders? So in the first case, you'll see mostly this one probably called open procedures, right? So we're dealing now with eTenders as a platform. So a tender that is put on the public procurement platform. And an open procedure is a one-stage process. It means the tender goes up. It's available for people who are interested in it to read it and to apply for it. And once you meet the minimum criteria then that's set out in the tender document, your tender will be entitled to be assessed, right? So mostly it's open procedure that's used. You will see in some cases restricted procedures. This tends to happen generally for large contracts and where they're complicated, where there's a lot of information needed or there's technical elements, there's maybe it could be that it's a large scope of work, and here you could have a qualifier, so what's called a PQQ first, and then a tender. So you will submit your bid under the qualifier, so for the first document. And if you meet the criteria laid out in that, so if you reach a high enough score, you're submitted then to the tender process. And then you would receive the tender itself and you would make a bid for the job. A framework, then, these are also quite common. Framework is where a number of suppliers will go into a framework. So what that'll mean is you'll be asked to submit your tender. You submit your tender, you meet the criteria, you score high enough, and you, along with the others who do the same, are submitted into the framework. Sometimes a framework will say, we're going to allow the best 5 in, or the best 3 in, or the best 8 in, or something like that. So you could be one of 5 suppliers, say, that's a part of a framework. And often within a framework, the way that'll work is a job will come up and the framework members will receive a tender document and they will bid for that particular job, right? So it could be those 3, those 5 will bid and one of them will get it. And when the next one comes up, the same thing will happen. The other way a framework might work is you could have suppliers who are ranked, say, 1 to 5, and the first one would be offered the job. And then if they couldn't do it, the second one would be given the chance. And if they couldn't do it, the third one, and so on. And another way that you see it work is that they could rotate it. You could have 3 members in a framework and the jobs get rotated. So if you're in a framework, it's one of those ways that it's going to work. And then one that you don't see an awful lot, but at times you will, is called a dynamic purchasing system. And that's where you can join at any time. So you'll see the tender go up and it'll be open-ended in terms of the end dates. It could be like tender goes up this month of June of 2023 and the contract lasts until June of 2026. And at any point within that, you can submit a tender. And if you meet the criteria, in that case, you're generally going into a framework and you could be offered work at some point, or you could be asked to make a bid for something at some point. So those are the types of tenders that come up. And that leads us then to the phases of public procurement. So we're all still okay, yeah? So here's what they're doing, right? From the point of view of the person doing the tendering. So this is, if you pick like a body that you would be typically dealing with, they will initially, it's useful to kind of notice what it is that they have to do or what their process is. They will pre-tender look at the project that's involved. And what will happen here is, like, if you think about it, that they have something to buy, maybe it's a piece of machinery, maybe they have to procure a particular service or so on. Well, from a buying point of view, they'll have to know what that is, you know, what is it that they're looking for? And they'll want to know as much about that as possible. So if they're buying a piece of machinery, for example, they will go out and investigate what it is that they're looking for. They'll build the technical criteria of what it is. If there are specific things that they need, you know, they're going to be able to lay those out. And they do that by doing their own research, and they may even conduct a preliminary market consultation. And that could include, you know, talking to contractors, you know, looking around, finding out details, you know, putting together their own scope, their own technical specs, their own, all this type of thing. That'll be normal, because in order to make a good purchase, then they're going to have to be able to go out and do this. And if you're a person in a purchasing or procurement department, it may be, if it's a really big one, that you have a lot of specialist knowledge around particular things that you're buying. But if you're a buyer in a company or in a public body, say public organization, semi-state or whatever, chances are you're going to end up buying things that you're not going to know a lot about, because the scope of your job is so wide. And so you would have to go out and find out things, and you would have to be able to put together the best criteria for so that you can do your job properly, and that your organization gets the thing that it's looking for. So that would normally be done pre-tender. And then when the tendering procedure is being done, so depending on whether procurement is subject to national or EU rules, right? Generally EU rules now. That's going to comprise, so the preparation of the documents, right? So they've got to put together tender documents. They then, when those documents are ready and they know what it is, they've laid out what it is that they're looking for, they're going to have to publicize that advertisement or put up a call for competition, right? Asking for interested suppliers to bid. So that's using eTenders in this case, like we were talking about. I think, like what Chris said, it's where electrical contractors, or I think that's what he said, would be, they would know what they want and they will just send out documents directly, or a request for a quotation directly. But here you're going to see that it's published on eTenders. Then when those tenders come in, they have to be evaluated. So you have to have, as part of your tender document, a selection and award criteria. And when the tender is received, they have to then match what they receive to the selection and award criteria, and then assess it across and award points to it on the basis of what they've laid out for themselves in advance. So if a procurer has done a good job, they will know what it is that they're looking for in great detail. They'll know what the key elements, the key things that they need to look for are. And they will, for themselves, have laid out then the criteria under which they can award the contract. And within each of those criteria, they will have, say, set out a list of specific things that they want to see in the bid. And the really good ones then will know how many points they are awarding for each element, you know, so they'll know what that's worth. And that's what the really good ones will do. They will have broken it down into great detail to know, when I receive a bid, I can match across and see what I'm being told in the bid, and I can see whether or not that meets what I'm looking for. And that's how it's supposed to work. And then when that's done, they have to notify bidders of the outcome. So if we submit a tender, we have to be notified. Did you win? Did you not win? You should be given your scoring and your scoring in relation to the winning bid. And you should be able to see in a clear, transparent fashion how you got on in your bid. And you should at least be able to compare that to the winning bid. You mightn't get to know who the winning company is, they mightn't tell you that, but you should be able to see in terms of the scoring how you did in comparison. This is really useful part of it. And this is a thing that we'll talk about later, that if you're submitting bids and you're not successful and you don't know how you got on, then you should be going back to ask, how did I get on, right? And that means that you should be provided with a copy of your score, and you should ask for that in relation to the winning tender. And this is really powerful for us as bidders, because we get to see how we did. We get to see where we were good, where we maybe need to improve. And it'll allow us then to go back in and have a look at the way we answered the bid and build a better tender or a better bid the next time. That's really important. And then when all that's done, you have the contract management phase, right? So this is when we win the job, say we win the job and we're working with the procurer. They then have to manage and monitor the awarded contract. And we then, as the bidder, would have a responsibility in that area as well. So I'm going to look at the thresholds. Again, I'm just going to say if I'm moving too quick or there's too much here, you need to jump in either in the chat or come on to me and say, or raise your hand. Yeah. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, sorry, just something that struck me there, what you said on the tenders. Yes, getting feedback on your own and getting the scoring, but did you also say you can get the scoring on the winning tender bid and then obviously for yourself, you're comparing yourself to that, but do you have access to their scoring then as well? You can request it.
Yeah, you should request it. Now, you should request it, right? And in most cases, they'll give it to you. In some cases, they could be a little bit, you can find some are a little bit reticent about it, and they'll try, this is what they do sometimes, right? Sometimes they will be afraid to get too into it, to provide too much information, because they don't want to open up, challenges as such, right? But I would say in like 4 out of 5 cases, when I would ask for my score in relation to the winning score, I'll get it, right? Because they're not necessarily giving you the whole breakdown or a full detailed breakdown of what the difference was. But if you ask for it in a lot of cases, you'll get it. And that's good because you can see a few things. You can see, like if you end up on the technical merit, say, of a tender and it's 40 points and you get 25 and the winner gets 35, right? Then depending on the scope of it even, I would even go back then and ask, where did I fall down in that area? Now, depending again on who you're dealing with, but in a lot of cases, they'll tell you, you fell down on this sector, right? They mightn't give you a lot of info about the winning one, but they might give you more information about your own one. So I think your question is maybe, do they have to tell you, or how much do they have to tell you? They don't always have to tell you, but good practice would be that they would. And if they're good procurers, because they have nothing to hide, right? They have a process that they're following. There's no reason really why they wouldn't, other than sometimes they can be afraid to maybe welcome, they don't want to open up too much to challenges. So they can be a little short in their feedback. But in a lot of cases, you'll get good feedback. And that's very useful for you or for me to help us build the next bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
And I would always ask, and I lose lots of bids, I have to say. But if you tender a lot, you're going to lose a fair few of them. And I always go back and ask. And it's great to know then what we need to do to improve. So, for instance, asking, can the bid winner see the other score? It depends. So I've seen contracts like maybe not even huge money contracts, like, I mean, nice jobs, maybe 6,000, 10,000, 12,000, where you'll receive back a full breakdown of the scoring for each one. In some cases, you'll even be given the names of the companies. In other cases, you won't see the name of the company, but you'll see a scoring chart that'll show the winner at the top, yours wherever it is, second, third, fourth, whatever, and the scores for each element of the tender that each person got. And you'll be able to see, I got 30 here, 20 there, you know, they got 40 there, 35 there, you know, this type of thing. But so sometimes everybody will see it, and other times nobody will see it, and you'll have to go back and ask. And the same for the winner. You could win a tender and not be told anything. And in that case, you mightn't be that interested either because you've won. You know, I know if I win a tender, I don't care what the others got. I'm not going back to know who got what if they haven't already told me. But if I don't win, I want to know. And I only want to know because I want to know why I didn't win and what can I do to improve. And I've often gone back to an organization and said, look, you know, can you just give me more feedback here, because I'd like to know how to do it better the next time. That's all I want to know. Can you give me some feedback? And in a lot of cases, when you do that, they will do it. Now, if you go for bigger jobs, bigger tenders, which I have to say in my business, I don't go for those because ours is a small business with 3 people. But in bigger jobs, if you go for a really large job, you would often get to a meeting. You'd go back to a meeting, or you could request a meeting and sit with the procurer and get a detailed feedback. And I've seen tenders of up to maybe 100,000 where I've been involved with helping other companies do them, you know, consulting on them, and where they've received full written feedback on each element that has given them a breakdown of what was good and what wasn't so good and so on. And that's really, really useful. And if you're going into tendering in a serious way, if you want to take it seriously, to me, this is a big element of it, because it's getting feedback that allows you or enables you to build better tenders. So you take it and you use them, what you're told, to answer questions better next time. And that's been a massive help for me myself, because tenders are quite difficult, you know, and I suppose you know this from doing them as well. So the more you know about how to answer better and better. So I might be a little long-winded there the way I'm going on about it, but if I am overemphasizing, that's why I think it's very important. So okay, the national procurement threshold, right? So these are how these works, or these are how these work. If you are going for a works contract, so a works contract is building, construction related, that type of contract, right? This is what the procurer has to do. If the job is less than 50,000 euros, it doesn't have to go on eTenders, right? The procurement procedure that's laid out is the procurer has to seek a minimum of 5 written tenders from competent contractors. And that's the wording there that's important, is seek. They have to go looking for that. That's why you will see part of their criteria will normally be that they will publish a copy in a local newspaper, or a national newspaper. Now that definitely, if it's a leader funding thing, they will have to do that. But they would have to show that they've gone out and looking for 5 quotes at least, but they don't have to go on eTenders. Now, a lot of them will go on eTenders because that's the easiest way to tick the boxes for them as procurers. If it's over 50,000 and up to 250,000, it's an open procedure. So if you remember, that's the first type of tender that we looked at a slide or 2 ago. And there you publish the contract notice on the eTenders, which we look at in a while. If for a works contract, it's over 250,000 euros, then you can use either open or restricted procedure. So open or restricted meaning you just publish a contract in eTender or a tender on eTenders, and it comes up or it doesn't. You're interested, whoever's interested can have a go. Restricted procedure meaning you can lay out qualifying criteria in advance, so a PQQ, and then depending on who meets that minimum criteria, you would then ask them to tender for the job. Vincent, yeah, sorry, I missed your last question. Is there a minimum time frame for response? No, I wouldn't say there is. I would make the inquiry. If they don't respond within a few days, I would go back again. And if they're being sort of funny about it, you're trying to assess how worthwhile is it you getting into the row with them. You generally find that they'll be okay with you. You know, mostly they're gonna give you the feedback, or they're gonna give you something. The problem with this is that as a supplier, the only recourse you have is to go to court. You know, there is no internal recourse that is going to, you know, so if you decided this isn't fair, I want to challenge it, then your challenge is through the courts. And that's restrictive from a supplier's point of view. I mean, maybe if it's a huge contract with a lot of money involved, you might do that. But mostly we're talking about goodwill. We're talking about, you know, asking nicely, and we're hoping that they will provide us with the details. And generally speaking, for how long is it up? Oh, you mean for a tender, Vincent? Yeah, there's always a minimum time frame. It's recommended for the procurer that they give a minimum of 21 days. If I was working with somebody buying, I think at least 20, well, it's at least, you should give at least 21. Sometimes they don't. I mean, sometimes it's 14, you know, but it should be 21 at least. And I think 28 is more fair. But yeah, there is a minimum time frame. And the end date would be there. Yeah, advertising in papers, they should do the same, you know, because from their point of view, they may not do that, but I mean, that would be negligent on their part. They should have an end date by which they need to receive the tenders. We know in reality, if it's going like this, right, they're going out to say 5 contractors and they want a tender in from 5. They're giving them a time frame or a date by which they want that received. And they know, they've well researched it at that stage. And they're telling them, look, we need to have your bid by this time. Because otherwise, it will stop them being able to go on with and complete the procurement procedure for themselves. You know, you could be 3/4 way through doing it. You could almost be getting ready to award a contract and then receive another bid, and that's no good. So yeah, you should always see an end date. And if they haven't given one, then they're slack about it. That would make me wonder. So that's works related services, right? So works related services would be the services that are related, like it could be engineering, architecture, you know, these type of things. So services related to a works contract. And again, here, if it's less than 50,000, you can go by direct invitation. It doesn't have to go in eTenders, although, like we said, it often will. And if it's over 50,000, it must go in eTenders. Now, a lot of people would be in the supplies or general services area where, again, like I would be. If it's less than 5,000, the procedure is that you can seek a variable quote. And they're told best practice is a minimum of 3. But by rules or by law, they don't have to. A buyer spending less than 5,000 can go out and get quotes from competent suppliers or service providers, and they can get one if they want to. And if that's what they do, that's what they do. They're allowed to do it. But best practice is to seek a minimum of 3. And if I was a buyer, I would be doing that because you would want to keep yourself right in that way. If it's between 5 and 25,000, you must seek a minimum of 3 written quotations. Here, though, you'll find if anybody in an organization that is procuring between 5 and 25,000, they will often go to eTenders because they will have, if it's grant funding, they will have restrictions placed on them or criteria that they have to meet. You know, there's rules they have to follow, and eTenders is the easiest way to do that. But you can go and seek a minimum of 3 written quotes, and you will see that happens quite a bit. as well. And then if it's over 25, it must go on eTenders, right? So jobs over 25,000 have to go on eTenders. You can see this as well with the local authorities. If you want to know who has been awarded jobs worth more than 20,000 by a local authority, you can look that up. You know, you can look up on the internet. And what they do is they publish the POs, the purchase orders of more than 20,000 within a time frame. And you can see then, you can see where money is being spent, what type of thing it's being spent on, and you can see the companies who are awarded the criteria. So it is very transparent, and that's not bad information to have either. You know, if you were in that sort of game, in that area, it'd be useful for you to see who's where are the bigger sums being spent, you know, what type of things are being bought or procured. And you'd also be able to see then who tends to win those. And from a sort of, even from a market and competitive analysis point of view, that's not a bad piece of information to have, you know, for your company to be able to go on then and sort of build a way of doing it for yourself. So the procurement categories, right? Time-wise, how are we 5 to, yeah, we'll go through this next sector until we get, and then we'll take we'll take 2 small breaks if you don't mind, maybe sort of 5 to 8 minutes each. So the procurement categories: professional services, facilities management and maintenance, utilities, ICT and office equipment, marketing, travel, HR, plant equipment and fleet, managed services, medical diagnostic and lab equipment, and minor building works. And included in professional services will be things like education, training, accountancy, law, you know, all those sort of areas, right? So I don't know whether I've anybody here who is in the construction area or construction related activities at all. If you are, will you just tell me and I'll go through this? And if you're not, I kind of brush through it. Okay, I think I'm going to kind of brush through it because I can't see, or I don't know whether we have anybody in this area. So the minor contract works are useful to know about if you are in the generating, repairs, maintenance, building area, right? Construction or construction related, because in the minor contracts works, the local authorities will publish, I think it's normally in September, they will publish a minor contracts works tender, and you can tender and get on that framework. And then it means that when these local authority jobs come up in any of these areas, you'd be able to bid for those. And that could be useful. And I know different companies that do that and find that it's a brilliant thing. If it was for you, Stephen will send you the slides from this anyway later on. So you'd be able to click on the link, supplygov.ie, and register on there where you'll get specific tenders related to that. Supplygov.ie, most of that stuff will be on eTenders anyway, but if you wanted to specifically concentrate in that area, I would go on to that. So I won't dwell on it because it doesn't look like we have anybody who's in that area. So we're going to look then at the area of registering on eTenders, right? And we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at the new site, the new eTenders upgrade. And if you're already on it, I'm going to show you as well how you would switch from the old one to the new one and what you need to do. But we're 10:58. If we were to take 7 minutes away from the screen, would that be okay until 11:05? Get a cup of whatever and come back, and we'll go into this next section. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we'll just have a look at the next. So I'm going to go to PowerPoint just for a second, and then we'll go in and have a look at what it all looks like. So So some of you have done this. Some of you have registered on eTenders. And for some of you, it's a new thing, I think, from what you've said. So if you've done it, you know this. If you haven't done it, then you'll see that you go to etenders.gov.ie. The new site is on there as well. The registration is free. It gives you access to the majority of public sector businesses. A good part of it is that you get automatic alerts on potential business opportunities that match what you do. So we'll see how to do that now by selecting what we call CPV codes, Common Procurement Vocabulary Codes. It's an online marketing tool to advertise your own expertise, experience, capabilities, and so on. I mean, I personally think that's overstating it a little. I don't think procurers are necessarily going checking out your profile that much. I think they probably have enough to be doing, but it does allow you to fill out details about your company and what you do and so on. And it'll give you insight on future business through prior information notices. PINs or prior information notices tend, again, to come for really big contracts, So you'll see PINs from large. I think I might have seen a PIN from Department of Education there recently or something. I mean, there would be normally really big contracts. It's letting you know that it's coming at some point in the future. It's maybe not interesting. But I think what we'll do is we'll go and we'll have a wee look at what it's all about. And if you haven't seen this before, this might freak you out just a little, but don't let it freak you out too much. Actually, you know what I'll do? I will show just for those who are already have a profile on it, but need to update or need to do your first login on the new site. So maybe if you haven't yet been on the new site, and this will sort of help us anyway, because I'm going to show you what the site looks like. But for anybody who hasn't been on the new site yet, so you're on eTenders and you're registered in eTenders, but you haven't yet gone to the new one. So since the 15th of May, say you haven't logged in. So on the 15th of May, the site changed over, right? And this is important to know if you're new. It was advertised that between the 15th and the 22nd of May, we should have went in and changed everything. Now that a lot of people won't have done that. I mean, most people won't have done that. But a couple of things that it's important to know. Not all historical data was migrated over. So priority was given to the important information, to call it. So basic org and user data, as well as framework DPS. And so they got the essential stuff over, but not everything. And that means that we then as users have to go in and update ourselves, right? So they've given us here, which to be fair, they do this well. They've given us here a sort of step-by-step for what you're to do. So again, this is for people who haven't yet been on it, who are registered in eTenders anyway, but you haven't yet gone on to the new one. So you'll go on to etenders.gov.ie as normal, right? And you will enter your old, so I'm going to send this to Stephen anyway, and he'll send it to you, so you can just follow the steps here if you're anywhere confused. But you'll put in your old username, so you'll go to log in just like you would log in, and when you press the word retrieve, it'll give you a new username, right? Now, in my case, all that did was I had my username, which was my name, using capital G, capital M, name, whatever, right? And then they just changed that to all lowercase and name all together, right? So it's not complicated, but they will do that. And that's due to the new security enhancements. And when you click send, so I'm scrolling here, don't let me make you seasick or anything, but just tell me to slow down if you need. When you do that, you'll get an email with a link and a registration transaction number. You'll click on the link, and just like you would with anything else, you create a new password, enter the registration transaction number, click finish, and then you go back to the login. So I'm scrolling here now, I know, but you'll go back to the login, you press login, and you put in the username that they've given you along with the new password that you've just created. And that's it. I mean, that's how you get in, right? Like I said, I'm going to give you this. I've already done it, so I can't bring you through a practical example of doing it. But it's as simple as that. If you're new to eTenders and you don't currently have a profile in eTenders, then you're just going to log into eTenders and create for yourself an account there, right? And I'm going to now show you what that looks like. And if you haven't been on here before, you're in for a treat. So if you know the old one, then you can see that this looks a bit different. And if you don't know the old one, then it doesn't matter. But across the top here, you'll see here, so here I am, and I'm the admin on this page. So that's all it's telling me there. And when you go to it here, we have a home page, CFT management, EO admin. So that's me or you or whoever's in charge. And then a list of preliminary market consultations, right? Now, what am I interested in here? The admin page, right? So when you log in and you go in here, it'll bring you to this, and you want to go into your admin page and you want to create for yourself organization details, right? Now, they're giving us pile of stuff here that we're able to fill out, which I haven't done yet, and I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to do it yet. But if you've already been on eTenders, you will find that your business name has been brought over, right? You can see here, I went in the 11th of the, no, I was approved on the 11th of the 5th by the system. That's my name, where I am, my email address, and my status, right? Now, if you're new to it, what you're going to do when you go in and you just create your login, create a password and go in, you will fill out your organization details here. And you might decide to fill out everything, right? Like I say, I didn't do that yet. I haven't decided whether I am, but we'll say things like company reg number, I will, VAT number, I will, you know, a few basic details like that. But whether I'll fill out everything here, I'm not so sure that that's very important, because I know when I do a tender, I'm providing details about who I am and what I am and so on anyway. But I will for sure show that I have company registration number, VAT number, and a few things like that, right? And may even put in my website details there. Now, really important, but you'll decide that. You'll do your organization according to the way you want. Really important here, right? If you are already on eTenders and you haven't yet gone in here, then you know about CPV codes, right? This is a vital aspect. A CPV code is what's called Common Procurement Vocabulary Code. And this is where you as a business select the sectors that you are interested in receiving alerts from. So a business or an organization within your sector decides to tender for something. They will put the tender up on eTenders, and they have to select a CPV code or codes for that tender. And if you as a supplier have selected that CPV code as being of interest to you, you will receive an email alert to tell you that that tender is now live on the eTenders marketplace. That's a vital step, because otherwise, if you decide you're serious about tendering, you would have to go into eTenders every day and go through all the hundreds of tenders that are published and try and find stuff that you're interested in. That would be a whole waste of time. So this is a really handy system. But if you're on the old system, then your CPV codes have not been migrated to the new system. So this is an essential step. You follow the PDF, you go in, you log in so that you're active on the new system, and you'll find that your CPV codes have not come across with you. And you're going to have to go in and reselect them, right? So whether you're new or whether you're not, we can have a look at how to do that. So, sorry, I maybe should have went a little slower there. Just let me check where I've gone. Yeah, I'm going to come out of that. So if you look over here, you'll see when you go into this edit CPV codes page, right? You'll see the little search bar. So we're looking at this, are we? I'm showing you the right thing. Yeah. Yeah. So you'll see the little search button here. We click on the search button and it's going to open up the CPV code. Now, if you're not familiar with these, you haven't seen them, it can be a little off button because there's quite a bit in this, right? But here, what it's giving you is a full list of all the various sectors. So you'll see here, if you look down, there's a code, a numbered code at the start. They're always 8 digits, I believe. And in there, you can see all the different sectors, all the different areas in which procurement is done. And there are loads of them. Now, there are less of them now than there were before because they've tidied them up a wee bit. So in whatever sector you are in, right, you can then go along. So we just pick the first one. If you were in the agricultural, farming, fishing, forestry, and related products sector, right, when you click on the little square here, right, to expand your box, it will then break it down further for you. And it will do this with each one, right? So it will go agriculture and horticulture, cereal, potatoes, vegetables, C&C, right? Farming, hunting, fishing. So it's going to break it down. And then within that, you will go to, you can do it again, right? And do it again. So here we've gone beverage and spice crops, and now it's going to give you beverage, coffee bean, tea, matte. And in whatever one, I'm just going to tell you a wee bit. In whatever one we decide to go to, right, it's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to give us a breakdown completely of all the various sectors that exist. So I'll look for one maybe here that I know. I'm trying to pick a business that I heard somebody talk about there, but I'm not really sure if I'm getting there. Yeah, let's go with business services, right? Let's go with education and training services, because I know that's where Andy be going, right? So when you click on this, you may just want to select education and training services, right? But you might look within it and you might decide on a criteria within that. You might say, okay, I'm looking at training services, right? I'm going to click on that and see specialist training, training facilities, vocational, environmental, safety. So it's giving me all the different sectors. So say, for instance, I'm interested in professional development, right? I'm going to go in here and enter this because I think this is how I did it. I'm going to search for it, right? And then it's going to bring it up for me. So I've seen it here. I'm entering it in here, right? I've searched, it's brought it in here, right? And I can click on that then, and I can add it to my list, right? And now I've got a CPV code entered for that, right? If I looked and said, okay, I can see here on this that I don't have any expanded element to this. But say I was interested in provision of language courses, which I'm not, but if I was, I would go in here and I would enter in 8058, and then it's always 4 zeros. I would search for it. It'll bring it up for me, and then I could add it to my list, right? And once I've added the CPV code of what I'm interested in to my list, I'm going to submit that. And when I submit it, my CPV codes are going to build. And you would take each one. Now this can be a bit laborious, that you're having to look through this and go through it and all that. It is a laborious part of it. but it's an essential part of it, because it's meaning then, like I said, this morning when I woke up, for me, I don't know if this is the same for everybody, for me, the emails come through at around 2:36 every morning. So I don't be up at 2:36 in the morning. Well, no, I don't be up at 2:36 in the morning. So I'm not going to see those until I get up. But when I wake up, I have an email from eTenders every day. And in that email, I'm seeing the tenders for the CPV codes that I am interested in coming through. And that's good for me because I can read those quite quickly and see which ones am I interested in or not. The ones that I'm interested in, I can click into and I can go in and I can find out more details, right? And I'm going to show you how that works now. Is that okay? And again, if at any point here you have something you want to ask me, I'll just click finish and be done. Then come into me and tell me, right? So I'm going to then go, right? I'm going to just show you one. So this is one from my email that I was interested in, because in my business, this is a thing that I would like to do. So there's a request for quotation for the provision of a consultant to develop a business plan for development of a multi-user community and enterprise hub in Coothill and County Cavan. And that is a thing that I would do and I would like to. So once I click on my interest in it, I accept it, right? It's now in my box, in my eTenders, and I can go in and click on that and it's going to give me a tender. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. Yeah, I'm going to give you a link to the login page later on. Yeah, hold off and I'll tell you what, when we go out of this, I'll go in and log in and show you what a login looks like. If that's okay. And I'm also going to give you a link in the details to the login page, so it should work. When you click on your tender then, you're going to then have a breakdown of what the tender looks like. And again, this is a just slightly different format than what was provided on the old sector, so it looks a wee bit different. And you can see here, it's just given us a whole bunch of stuff, right? Am I really interested in all of this? I'm not really interested in all of this. I'm scanned down through it and I'm going to have a look, right? There are a couple of things that I'm really interested in. And I don't need to look here to get it, but at the same time, because it'll be in the tender. But I do want to know when it's due. So this one is due on the 16th of, which is Friday at 12 o'clock. The clarification period. So this used to be called date for queries. So clarifications or queries are within a tender. I would have mentioned this in the first section. If you have a query on the tender, you submit your query to the awarding body, which in this, or the contracting authority, which in this case would be local enterprise or the Cavan County Council. And those clarifications or queries will be in a sector in the tender, and they will answer it in there so that it's transparent. Everybody can see what the question was and everybody can see what the answer is. And you're told here that they must be in by the 8th of the 6th. I would want to know this because if I had a clarification I wanted to get, I need to know to have it in on time. And they're not obliged, nor will they answer anything that I would send in or that you would send in after that date, right? Anything else? Nothing really here. I mean, everything else here is going to be in the tender, but you can see that it's giving you a lot of info here, right? You can see here down the bottom, now you need to check into queries, like, and if the system's working right and this is accurate. This is also pretty interesting. The number of openers here, it says, is 2, right? That means I've opened it, and according to this, only one other person has opened it. Now, I'm really going to go for this job now, aren't I? Because according to this, it's me or somebody else, you know. It's a straight fight to the finish. So I'd be interested in that one. So when we click in there, we're getting that, right? Sorry. I need to go back here because I want to All right, yeah. I'm going to show you what else is in here. Yeah. So this one's important, right? Haven't looked at it, right? Having a thing, yeah, I'm interested in it. You know, you're looking at something you may be interested in. I need to go over here then to this part, right? Show CFT menu, right? So the core information, fair enough, that's what you're getting here in the workspace, right? Or you're going to get, they're going to maybe expand it out a wee bit, tell you a wee bit more about what they're looking for. Big thing that I'm really interested in is, I'm really interested in the CFT documents, right? I'm going to go there in a minute. I don't want to withdraw anything, specify it there, it's okay, I've done that. But here's what I want to do. I want to see, was there any messages? Are there any queries or clarifications raised, right? I'm guessing on this that there isn't, but I don't know for sure. So I'm going to go in here and see, are there any messages? Because has somebody raised the question that they've answered that's given us a wee bit more information about what's going on? No, nobody has. And I wouldn't have thought so either. It looks very, and I haven't sent any messages or anything. So there's nothing there. If there was a query or a clarification, a query raised, clarification issued, it will be in here and I'd be able to see it the same as anybody else, right? In this case, there isn't one. But I want to see the documents, right? The documents are important. So I'm clicking on that, right? And now it's given me here the quotation documents and I'm going to download those, right? And once I've done that, I now have what I need from the tender. And I'm going to give you a look at what a tender looks like for those that wouldn't be familiar with it. So in terms of the, say, admin and in terms of the system itself, right? We know how to edit the codes. In terms of view users, it's going to tell us, right, who it is that use. I'm the only one that uses it here. So, but I can edit my account in there and we can add users if you have people in your business that you wanted to be able to get access to the tenders and see them and so on. You would go into this, edit your account here and just add them in. Sorry, I have a question in the chat. Barbara said, you spend a lot of time. Yeah, you could, Barbara. And I'd have to say I wouldn't. I would do the basics of what I'm showing. I would go in, I'd fill out the details I want to be there. I would select my, my codes. Another document I'm going to give you is a user manual. Now, the user manual is very large because it goes into everything that you would need to know. But the front section of the user manual will deal with the basic elements to start with.
Yeah, it's just there seems to be an awful lot of sections you could end up down a rabbit hole behind each click. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I was just thinking there.
Yeah, and you're right. And you could, and like I say, I would take the 4 or 5 things that we're doing here and do those. And then you'll find maybe within a bigger company where there's a tendering department, they're in here and they're using this for all sorts of stuff. But really what we want is that we're on there, that we have our CPV codes selected accurately. We get our alerts. When we get an alert that's interesting to us, we click on it, it brings us back in. We go into that tender, we get the documents for the tender and we download them. And then we get out of the site. You know
I have it open here on the other screen. I haven't created a user account. I'm just filtering around as you're going through there and searching codes. But the other thing I was thinking when you're going through it, as you're looking at the CPV codes, so like you opened your one there, say for Cavan, and it was covered under five or six different codes. And that was one thing that struck me then, is that when somebody is putting up a tender, what codes they use, how they describe it, but yet you might be looking for it, but visualize it under a different code. Do you know what I mean? So it's that matching then and finding all those codes under which your product can sit. Yeah,
and that's a great point. Like, and that is the laborious part in a way of the CPV code thing. It's making sure you've selected enough to cover what the buyer might do, just like you said, because they might go in. It's called common procurement vocabulary because it's supposed to make it standard, you know. But that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You might call it training, they might call it education, or you might call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I just like this specific coaching and stuff that I was looking for, and but I've actually found one, but coaching wasn't one of their codes that they used. It was business service.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's why I would select the ones that I can see are directly related to me. And I would select the ones that I think might be related to me or are in my sphere. And for exactly the reason that you said, and the challenge, or like what some people would say, the problem with it is when you get your emails in the morning, because this does happen to me, like you get your email and maybe there's 10 or 12 or 15 things on it, and I'm interested in one or two or none, because I've had to go wide to make sure in case a buyer would use a code that I didn't use, but maybe they, like you said, maybe they've stuck it under business services instead of under coaching. And I didn't select business services because I'm a coach, and then I end up missing out. So you do have to try to capture everything that possibly could be yours. And then it's just in the morning when you get your mails, you are looking, you're scanning it to see, and you see that there's stuff here that's not for you. But to me, it's the only safe way to ensure that you're getting everything that might be yours.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and it's a great point for everybody that you can go down a rabbit hole. And that's why I would do the sort of straightforward things and then get out of it and get to your document and get to see the stuff that's really important. And so in terms of it and how it works, these are the key elements, right? Like I said, I'm going to give you a user manual anyway. And for people who would like to go, further into it and into the usage of it and all the various things that are in there, then you could do that. You could explore the manual and bit by bit bring your way through it. But I can promise you from a small business perspective, like what we're looking at is more than adequate. It's exactly what you need. And if you're going to use eTenders, in a really detailed way, like you're going to hold all your information in there, you're going to manage your stuff in there, and that's a different thing. But again, like you'll also find that probably for us, where we tend to, in terms of micro business, like under 10 people and a couple of million in turnover, like we tend to bid for certain types of jobs. We're not normally bidding for, high hundreds of thousands or into the 7-figure sums for jobs. That's not normally happening. If you are, you will find that sometimes you would manage everything that you're doing within the eTenders platform. But in the main, like at least 3 out of 4 times, you're going to find that you're going to build the tender documents separately yourself. And okay, you're going to submit them through eTenders a lot of the time now. But that's as far as it goes. You're not using the platform for anything more really than what we're looking at here. So are there any other specific questions about what we've looked at so far? Or, would you be happy enough to take the documents that I'm giving you, go through them and see, and ease your way into it? And then what I like to offer is like, if you at any point following the workshop when you go to do it, if you're stuck at all, if you send me an email or send Stephen a message asking, can you send me a mail? Then you can, and I'll happily hop on with you for 10 or 15 minutes and help you out and show you what I can, if that's all right. Because we could, as Barbara said, we could down a rabbit hole here and we could stay here all day looking at it. But we're going to look at a lot of stuff that isn't really relevant and that you're not going to need in terms of being able to submit bids for yourself, right? Okay. So if it's okay with you, right, that's what it looks like. I'm going to give you the documents, like I said. We're going to try, because I wouldn't mind getting to the whole area of, actually, we had one question about logging in. So let me just see. Actually, why don't I come out of mine and I'll see if. Yeah, and okay, and I'm going to see if I can go. I'll just show you the login page. And hopefully it works. And that's okay, Barbara, and thanks for coming along. Thanks for your contribution. So this is the site. It's etenders.gov.ie, and when you bring up the website, there it is, and the login page is here on the right-hand side. And now you have your username and password. And I've just made all mine lowercase, and hopefully I remember my password. Yeah, that's it. So it's etenders.gov.ie.
Hello, Gordon. Yeah, when I click into that, it takes me back to a general page about European dynamics. Am I doing something wrong here?
No, that's what it's called now, European dynamics. Does it not look like this? No. Does it look like that?
Yeah, when I go to sign in, yeah.
Yeah, if it looks like that, right? When you bring it up, say, and it looks like that, and you should see a login button on the top right-hand corner.
Yes.
And if you click on that login button, it brings you to the login. And what you'll do there is you'll enter your old username and then press forgot your password. But I'm going to give you, rather than sort of labor around it here, I'm going to give you the little PDF that I showed, which will just bring you through the steps of doing that. And you see, they will have created for you a new username. And so they're going to let you retrieve your new username, and you're going to create a new password. That's just a step that you have to take. But I'm giving you a little step-by-step, pictorial step-by-step on how to do that following the course. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so bear with me, just let me sort out the slide here. Yeah. Now, and we should be back looking at some slides again. Yeah, so like we said, we would set up our alerts or CPV alerts to make sure that we're getting what we need to get. All right, and we do because we don't want to be missing out. And surprisingly to say here, only 50% of suppliers use the business alerts. That's what we just looked at with those CPV codes. That's surprising, like that it's that low. We really should use those. So if you are registered, right, and if you're not, then that would be the first thing you would do. If you've set up your alerts, so you want them, your CPV codes are set up, you're set up to receive alerts from them, you've put in your company profile details, then you'll be notified of the opportunities that come up for you, right? And like we talked about, and that's going to lead to us then having to go about doing a tender. And so that's the next part that we're going to talk about. So we've covered of knowing how tendering works, what public procurement, what the rules are, the structure around it, and all that. Looking then into the site itself, the eTender site, and what's happening there. And then that brings us to the selection criteria, because we're going in now to look at 46. What happens with a tender, right? How do we actually go about doing a tender? And in doing a tender, what are the key things that we're looking at to try and do it well? So when the tender is set out by the awarding body, they have a number of things that they have to cover. And when they're setting out the selection criteria, it has to be based around these areas. So one thing that they can use is your economic and financial standing. You might see within a tender that they want to see that you have a basic level of turnover, maybe. They might want to see that you are a secure company. So they might look for some details around your company turnover, your figures, your profits, or so on. And that could happen, even turnover will happen in relatively low value basic level tenders, right? Another area that they can set out is your professional and technical knowledge or ability. So they're going to want to know that you have the knowledge and ability to carry out the job that they are tendering for. That's important to them, right? We'll have a look at sort of how to break this down in a little bit. Another area that they can use for selection criteria is quality assurance standards. So they might ask that you assure them of the quality procedures within your business or your company. In some cases, they'll ask for external certifications. So that might be an ISO. In a lot of cases, especially for smaller ones, they will accept that you have quality assurance procedures in place for yourself and that you're self-certifying, but you would provide them with some details of what that is. Environmental management standards often comes up or can come up as well. So that would be a thing. And they might also have what they call objective non-discriminatory short listing criteria. So they're not allowed to discriminate, but they could have objective criteria that would be specific to the thing that they are tendering for, right? The most common mistakes that are made is where we mix up selection and award criteria, or a clear set of requirements are not defined. And that can happen, but procurers have gotten really good at this. They've gotten good at setting out what it is that they want and creating scoring around that and letting suppliers know what it is that they're looking for. And it can be a mistake on our part as well for us not to read what it is that they are looking for, the detail of what they're looking for, and to not answer in the right way what they're asking, right? So that's the thing that we're going to try and address now over the next while of the course. Really common thing that you're going to see is, so in the selection criteria, there are some areas in which lowest price must be used, right? We'll touch on that a bit later. The most common one you'll see now is what's called MEAT, or most economically advantageous tender. And this is where the awarding body or the procurer uses a range of criteria, so different criteria to assess the tender under. It must be used for certain sectors, like for works-related contracts. And within that, what will happen, the procurer will select, say, price as a criteria, and they will award a certain number of marks to price. And then they'll select quality or quality criteria and award a certain number of marks to that. They could select technical merit and do the same thing, or an environmental characteristic. There could be service and technical assistance part. There could be something to do with delivery or commissioning or that type of thing. In whatever way that they do it, the weighting criteria for this type of tender must be clear. you have to know, looking at it, for the price, how many marks have been awarded, quality, how many marks have been awarded, and so on. So it must be clear to us as suppliers what it is, the criteria under which tender will be assessed. And we should be able to see that clearly in the tender document. And this is often what it will look like. So for anybody who's familiar, you'll have seen this before if you've seen tenders. If you haven't, this is how an example of what meet scoring would look like. So you'll see that there's award criteria, and in this case, it's the price. It's showing an understanding of the project. It's a methodology, delivery of service, and the quality of the proposed team. Normally adds up to 100 or 1,000. That's normally the figures to use, right? Some of the bigger ones, or some of them might do 5,000, or they might do, 10,000. It just depends. But you'll see it in whatever way it's done. And so here you can say in percentage terms, 40% of the points go to price. And that means that only 40% of the marks can go to price. An understanding of the project, 10%, methodology and delivery of service, the same. And then for the quality of the proposed team, they're given 30% of the marks. And here's what it would typically look like if you got, if you were sent this. And I think this is possibly one. I don't know, it was on mine, but it could be. So it's definitely a real one that I took from somewhere. So you see here, lump sum price, your marks, and the marks and score of the successful tender. In this case, mightn't have been mine because it's the cheapest one. Your marks, you got a 384 out of 400. And the winning tender got 297 out of 400. Now, what that'll tell you is, looking at this, your marks bid was cheaper than the score of the successful tender. So in this case, they were given 400 marks for price. And what happens with the price is, and I'll be able to show you this a little later in a bit of detail, but with the price, the lowest price tender receives the maximum number of marks. So the cheapest tender received, right, the lowest price received here would have gotten 400. And then there is a formula used, a standard formula that's used in tendering that then takes each price submitted by another tender, and it's divided into the price of the winner and then multiplied out to get the marks for that price. The marks for your price are always related to the price of the lowest price tender, so of the one that wins the maximum points. I should be able to show you that formula in a little bit. If you're not into the maths, it's not much crack anywhere, but you'll see the importance of it when we look at how do we assess what our price was versus what the price of the winner was, or versus what the price of the lowest score was. So in this case, we can see, like, if the lowest price was 400, we were 384, we got 384 marks. We weren't that far off the lowest price. We didn't win the tender. And the successful tender was quite a bit off the lowest price, but won. So let's have a look at how did they win. Well, in the understanding of the project, we were awarded 80 marks. So your marks 80. And the marks of the successful tender was 100, right? So they were deemed to fully understand and to meet the criteria that was laid out for an understanding of the project. Whereas whoever submitted this, your marks, maybe me, only got 80, right? So therefore, we lost out marks on not showing a full understanding of the project. And the next one that they assessed was the methodology. So in terms of the methodology, this would be the way in which you would go about delivering the service or doing the job. So we got 70 and the winner got 90. And the same for delivery of service. We got 70 and they got 90. And then when they looked at the quality of the proposed team, again, in terms of the criteria that they would have laid out for the quality of the proposed team, the winning score got 280 and we got 210. And so then when they add up the total, and this is what they have to do, when they add up the total, they discover that one got 814 and the other one got 857. And even though the other one was more expensive, that's the one that won because it got the most marks overall. And that's how a tender scoring is supposed to work. Now, of course, if it is a lowest price only, then you'll be told it's lowest price only. And then it's just 100% of the marks for the lowest and so on and so forth, right? But in the majority of cases, you're going to see that there is more than price being assessed. And so it will be an accumulation of the marks that you receive that win. And so it's not necessarily going to be the cheapest one that wins. It will be the one that is the best overall bid. Does that make sense? Or do we have any questions on that at all? No? Okay. So the evaluation of tenders, right? So when you do your tender, right, and that tender goes in, the procurer or the buyers, they have to evaluate the tenders, right? They have to see which one meets the set requirements, and of the ones that do, which ones meet the set requirements, and of the ones that do, which is the best one on the basis of the pre-announced award criteria, either lowest priced or most economically advantageous. And whoever has that, like we just shown, they win. That's it, right? And there are rules around this, or key principles. And because we're going to look at a wee bit more detail here, and we're going to go into doing tendering, and we've now been on the screens for almost an hour, I'm going to suggest that we take another 7 minutes. Is that all right? So it's 11:57, hitting 58. We'll come back on at 12:05, and we'll run through then, how do we write a tender to meet this criteria that's laid out and try to get successful at winning them. Okay? So 12:05, okay? Okay, so the key principles, right? Key principles around which under which we are going to tender is non-discrimination, equal treatment, transparency. So all records must be kept, right? And any actions or decisions by the evaluation panel must be kept. So this helps to keep any discriminatory behavior away. Confidentiality. So the process of evaluation of tenders must be conducted in a confidential manner. And so they stay on the premises. It's done by the people who are appointed to evaluate the tender. So we can see from this that we know that when we submit the bid, we're submitting the bid into a transparent, straight up process. And that's very helpful for us in terms of what we're trying to do, because we want to be assessed on a fair basis according to the criteria laid out, because we will have taken our time to make the bid according to that criteria and ensure that we do the best job that we can. So when the evaluation people have a look at the bid that we've submitted, right, they first of all ensure that the tenders received are complete and that any requirements that they have set out for us, that we have complied with them. And then they will apply the pre-announced award criteria to evaluate the tenders, right? So to check that everything's there that should be there, and then they will check to make sure that all the different sectors or sections have been answered. And then they get on with evaluating it and awarding it, right? Now, if you see a tender that comes out that's been awarded to on the basis of lowest price, then what they'll do is they will set out in the tender document a set of procedural requirements or formalities, right? They'll want that there are set specifications or any substantive requirements that they have that are met. And so what they're doing there is ensuring that all tenders received can be assessed on the basis that you meet a minimum criteria of quality or ability or knowledge or whatever. And once you do that, then your tender is a compliant tender. And it will be, we'll assess it now. We know that these are okay. We can accept tenders from these companies because they're meeting the criteria that we need. And now it's on the basis of price. If you have to, or you decide that you want to do a tender that is being awarded to the lowest price, you ensure that you're pricing everything in it, right? When they're evaluating it, they're looking to see that all the price elements are in it. They'll have a look and see, you know, that it adds up, that it makes sense. And when they do that, they see that if a tender is abnormally low, so if you had a bunch of tenders, like I saw one for an engineering consultancy recently where the job was around 60 to 70,000, you know, the bids were coming in like 60, 62, 63, there was a 66, a 67, a 72. So they're all around the price and they look quite similar to each other. And there was one in for like 35 or 36,000. The one at the 35 or 36 was considered abnormally low compared to the others, right? And that would be a red flag for the people making the purchase, because you're naturally going to worry then that not everything has been priced and that not everything has been considered. And you will have done or they will have done their pre-tender preparation, and they'll have an idea. And from that, because they'll have an idea about it, because they'll know what's involved, and also they will have had to sort of given an idea of the budget required and so on to get approval for the spend and all that. So when you think about it procedurally, there's quite a lot going on. And then you submit a bid that's way lower than what they're expecting and way lower than what the others have submitted. And that's abnormally low means, or that being abnormally low means that they're going to worry about it. They're going to automatically think that there's something maybe not right with the bid. In that case, they're entitled to do a couple of things. They might say, once they've said in their tender, and a lot of the time you'll see this, that they've said abnormally low bids, you know, will not be considered, or they might give themselves room to investigate them. So they might go back to you to ask, you know, have you priced everything? Have you considered everything? So on. They're not going to get too involved with you, but they may follow up on it to check it out. But a lot of the time, that bid won't make it. You know, there would be too much worry about it, and it would be considered abnormally low. I was involved in one of these myself in the company I worked with, where the bids were all of a certain nature, and there was one that was like, you know, 55% of the average of the others or something like that. And it was just considered abnormally low, and the contracting body wouldn't take them. You know, they didn't consider their bid credible. And so it's not that it has to be a lowest price that's pitched in, I'm not sure what the word, maybe in, you know, in a silly way, you know, or in a, you don't need to lowball prices here. What you want to do is take each tender on its merit, and one that's been awarded on lowest price, you're taking the merit of what you're being asked to do, pricing it accordingly, doing the best that you can with it, and submitting that. Now, another thing to consider with this, and I would do this, I wouldn't personally tender for a lowest price bid, because I don't think there's enough room in it for me, for myself, to be able to try and win the business. You know, I would rather have to answer quality criteria and so on in order to give myself a bit of a chance. Lowest price for me wouldn't be the thing. For you, you would consider that. If it's only being awarded on the basis of lowest price, are you interested in doing it? And maybe depending on the business that you're in, you know, they're exactly the type of bids that you make, and you might want to do that. But it is worth thinking about, because another thing that we haven't quite got to get is the decision to bid and not to bid, and we will get there. So when we do, we'll talk a wee bit more about that. If it is a most economically advantageous tender selection criteria, so that's the meat like we talked about, then you have to meet the set procedural requirements and formalities. So whatever procedural or formal aspects they've included, excuse me, you must meet those. Any mandatory specifications or mandatory requirements are evaluated by applying the pre-announced specific criteria and their relative weighting. So this is where they say in the tender document, like we look in a bit, what they are awarding criteria, what they are awarding points for. So what criteria are they using to award the points for? And if a more detailed evaluation methodology was disclosed in the tender documents, this methodology must be followed. For us making the bid, this is really good because this means we can see in advance how this tender is going to be assessed. And so we can submit our bid on that basis. So a few important points to keep in mind, right? Once pre-announced criteria and weightings has been announced, they can't be changed or waived during the process of evaluation of tenders. So if you have a criteria set out, technical spec, maybe a service element, quality of your team, quality of proposal, price, and there are set criteria, set points awarded for each of those criteria, then that can't be changed. You know, they can't turn around, the buyer can't turn around and just change that at some point. So the methodology and criteria has to be applied as they stand. And the same scoring rationale must be used. So this, like I was saying earlier, if the really good buyers will have the award criteria set out, the points for that award criteria allocated, and within that, they'll have broken that down to say, under technical merit, say, the 5 key things that we need to see are the following, and they'll have a description of those for themselves. And if there were 40 points, they would give each one 8 points. And then when you submit your tender, if you have met 4 of the 5, you would get 32 out of 40 points. That's how it would work. If you had 3.5 of the 5, you would get 28 points out of the 40. That's how it works. That's the way it's supposed to go. The way it's supposed to go. So you're hoping for good buyers, professional purchasers who have done this work and who know in advance exactly what it is they're looking for. When it comes then to the price element or the financial aspect, the evaluation panel will check to ensure that all costs are included. They will see any adding up errors, right, and correct them. You know, like, so they'll want to see that I'm trying to think of an instance where this might happen, like where you have individual prices, maybe for different elements of the job that you're doing, and you've put in those prices, and when you add it up, it doesn't add up to the total. They can correct that to add it up to the correct total for you, right? And like I said, investigate any tender that appears to be abnormally low. So they'll look around the price and what needs to be done, and then if it's abnormally low, like we talked about. And for most importantly, or for most economically advantageous tender, they'll have an evaluation grid or a matrix, and that evaluation grid or matrix needs to be used to score it, right? And when you get your evaluation report or your letter to tell you whether you won, you didn't win, or whatever else, you should receive that grid or matrix that shows you, like we talked about, how you did, and it should relate it to the winning bid. And if it doesn't, you would go back and ask for that. And that's, like I said, really important. So what is it that buyers are looking for? They're looking for a robust business, right? Before they will engage you or me or anybody else, they'll want to ensure that the business is robust, that you're there and you're going to be there, right? And they'll want to see that they're getting value for money. That's an important element of the principles around public procurement, is value for money. So it's ensuring it doesn't always have to be the cheapest. It's not necessarily the cheapest, but it needs to be that in terms of what's needed and the criteria laid out, that we are getting everything we need at a fair price. Fair price meaning they've been able to evaluate prices, mine, yours, everybody else's, and they can see what the market rate is for the thing that they're looking for. And they are within that, and that's helping them get value for money. They're going to want to see quality systems and controls, that you have an element of quality built into your business and into what you do. They'll want to see technical knowledge, right? That you have a technical knowledge of the thing that you're doing. They'll want qualified and experienced people. So often you're going to be asked to submit details of the people who are going to be carrying out the work. And that can be anything from an organization chart. It could be bios or CVs of individual people. Often the account manager or the person in charge or the responsible people around the delivery of the service, their bios or CVs will be required. You know, maybe even a breakdown of the experience they have and so on. So they're going to want to see that they're getting into business with somebody who has all these things, you know, and has people around the business that can do what they need to do. And they'll look at your track record, and often you'll see they'll ask for, we want examples of 3 previous jobs or 2 previous jobs, or we want examples or evidence of a track record of completing this type of work in other places, right? So a track record is also going to be an element that they look for. And they're going to want to see that you understand the tender and what's required and what it is that they're after. And then quality of service will also be a thing that they'll look for. They'll want to see that you're capable of delivering quality service. And they'll probably, in your track record or in your, where they look for previous examples, they'll want to see examples of you having delivered something similar in a quality way. And they'll also probably ask for the names of referees. So people who you can refer them to, who will tell them about what you were like to work with before. So that would also be important. These are things for you as a business to have a look at and see, you know, do I have these things in place? Because if I don't have these things in place, if I don't, for example, have quality systems and controls in place, then I'm going to have to get to grips with that in order to be able to bid successfully. If I don't have a proper bio and CV, even for myself or for yourself, then it's going to be a thing that you'll need to do, because you'll want to have this stuff built up to be able to answer effectively. And we'll talk about maybe what you do and ways of doing that now in a few minutes. The other thing that might come up is buyers tend to really like innovation. And innovation can mean that you just have an approach or a way of doing things that might be a bit different. Or you use a product that's a wee bit different. You know, you're doing something that helps you to stand out from the range of bids that they're receiving. And this can be very good, because when you write your bid, if you include an element of innovation in it, you know, a novel approach, something new, something you've investigated and looked into and found through practice, and you can describe that, that can be very attractive for a buyer then, thinking about who it is that we're going to bring in to do the work. So they're the sort of things that they're going to look for. So then we know from what we've talked about so far, we've talked about the procurer or the buyer. We've talked about the way in which they might look at things. You know, we've talked about what their job is like in terms of building up a tender. And when we're thinking about tendering, it's useful to think about their perspective. You know, what are they looking for in a supplier? And can I meet that? And we should be able to say that we can, in order for us to go ahead and do the bid. We should be able to say that. The next part of this then is making a decision, right? It's, do I tender or do I not tender? you might look at a criteria and see that they're looking for something that I can't do. So it could be that they specify that they want previous experience of, they might want 2 examples of having previously delivered this particular thing in the past 3 years or 2 years or 12 months or something, right? And you might not have that previous experience. That's leading you then to think, do I tender for this one or not tender for this one? You might see one that comes out that's lowest price only, right? It's been awarded on the basis of the lowest price. You might look at that and think, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm not the cheapest. I don't want to be the cheapest. So that's not a bid for me, right? There could be various things that would help you to decide. One of the other things you look at is you will go to the tender and have a look at what the award criteria is. And where they have minimum requirements, right? Or substantive criteria that they're looking at. That could be, say, they might look for a minimum level of turnover. So say they look for a minimum level of turnover of 500,000 euros, right? And your business is doing 200,000 euros. Then you're wasting your time. You're not going to bid for that because you're not going to be able to meet the minimum criteria that they're looking for. In the same way as if you'd never done a job in that area before, you might well look at it and go, well, they're looking for specific experience around a particular thing. I've never done that particular thing. And they're telling me here I have to give them 2 examples of having done that particular thing. Now, I have to say personally, I wouldn't then do that tender because you're not going to get it. And the thing is, when you go through the whole thing of tendering, it takes a lot of time. Tenders take time to do. And even if you do the things that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, like build a tender bank and so on, even then they still take time. And so we'd want to look at, first of all, what is the substantive criteria, the qualifying criteria that they have. Do I meet it, yes or no? If we don't meet the qualifying criteria, I wouldn't do the tender. Meeting the qualifying criteria and then looking into what specifics are they looking for. So I'm thinking about the buyer and what that buyer needs, what they decided they need, or what the buying team needs. Can I meet that or can't I? If I can't meet elements of what they're looking for, I'm not tendering. I'm not telling you not to tender, but that's decision time, right? We want to be putting the time and effort into bids that we think that we have a good chance of winning. And meaning we can at least meet the minimum criteria and we can at least meet the specifications, the things that they're specifying that we need to be able to do. And that could be evidence of having done it before and that type of thing. Once we've decided then to tender, it's about putting together a tender strategy, right? Building a process for ourselves. And this can be very sort of convoluted and highfalutin and all that, but it doesn't have to be. This can be very straightforward. This can be you on your own doing the tender, but laying it out for yourself in a proper, coherent, cohesive way that's logical, that allows you to build up what you need to do. We then look at managing the process of what we're doing, right? And then producing the tender document. Now, I don't know about you, I've often spent 2 days on a tender. Sometimes I've spent a full morning on a tender. I've been involved in tenders where you've worked for 4 or 5 days on the tender. So there's a lot goes into doing the tenders. And when we're small business owners, time is very precious. And so that's why I think this decision making around tender, don't tender, meeting criteria, understanding what we're going for is important, because we want to ensure that when we do it, we're doing something that we have a chance of winning. So how do we manage this? So the tender, writing a tender and submitting a tender is very like doing a project. The first thing that we're going to do is summarize the request for tender. So this is the thing that I would do. I would go through that tender document, and then I would write for myself the list of requirements. What is it that they are looking for? Or I would highlight them out within the document, right? And I'd know for myself now, okay, this is what they're looking for from us. In doing that, you're able to identify any deliverables and activities. So you're able to see what are they looking for specifically, what you're doing, right? I then would, because you're managing this as a project and there's quite a bit to do with it, I decide when I'm doing it, right? And also looking at what the deadline is, right? So when is the tender due? What needs to be done? And when is it between now and then I'm going to get those things done? Maybe you're just going to sit down for a day and you're going to do it. Maybe you're going to work at it in the evening when you're done with your normal work during the day. You're going to spend time on it over 3 or 4 evenings. Whatever way you're going to do it, it's good to have it planned out and know. Now, for here, roles and responsibilities. I mean, depending on your business, I know within my business, I do the tenders. There's nobody else to do them. That's how it goes. Maybe in your business, it might be different. You might have employees or somebody who could do this for you. So, but you would decide who's doing what, right? I would love to be able to do that, but unfortunately, I can't. Okay, we prepare our templates, compile the tender, proofread at the end, right? And then we put it all together and we deliver it, okay? Let's look at a few elements of that are really important. When we go to write the proposal, so that's what we call it, like we're putting our tender together, we're writing the proposal. The first thing we want to do is get an understanding of what it is that they're looking for, because that's exactly what we are going to answer. If they tell us they're given a certain amount of points or marks for a particular thing, we are answering it according to that, right? We know what they're looking for and we're going to answer that. And then knowing that, we plan out our answer. We put the key elements in headings as what we want to get across to the supplier. So whatever, say, technical spec, details of your team, previous contracts, whatever it is that they're looking for, we know that we plan out to say, okay, I'm including this information within this answer. A great move, and like a lot of people don't do this, but a good way of doing it is write out a little executive summary for yourself, right? Summarize what it is that they're looking for. So you have it on paper so you can look at it and see. And then put together a wee methodology for how you're going to go about it, right? And make sure we use proper grammar and spelling. Now, one of the things that you'll find with doing tenders possibly is that, you know, it's coming to a deadline. And because it's coming to a deadline and we want to get it in, we're rushing it and rushing it. It's always better because you're getting 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even longer sometimes. But because you're getting that type of time, then it's good if you can method it out, you know, timeline it out, decide when you're doing what and plan it for yourself. And don't leave it that you're rushing the day before having to try and fill it in. Now, I know that sounds kind of easy, and it isn't easy because I know everybody's really busy. In small businesses, everybody's really busy. So I know that it's tough to necessarily do that, but it is, if you approach it from this point of view, they're not, and they're structured more and looked at more as projects, they're not as off-putting or as frantic or stressful as they are when it comes to the last couple of days before it and it's due and you're really rushing to try and do it. So here are some really important things about the tender itself. You focus on maximizing the marks awarded in the submission. And this is really important point, because what a lot of companies will do when they tender, they have a bunch of stuff and they fire it into the tender, whether it's looked for or not. You have to look at where the marks are going and why they're going there. And then you answer according to that, because the whole goal is we're trying to maximize the marks. I don't know if this is an analogy, but I have a youngster doing the Leaving Cert, and one of his teachers, his business teacher said, you know, his problem is he writes his business answers like he's writing an English answer, and they don't care. They need you to put in the keywords for what they're looking for. And if you only wrote those words, you would get the marks. And it's a bit like that with this. It's, you have to focus on maximizing the marks that they are awarding. Not just, you'll see even companies now will have tender bank put together of loads of documents, and they're just going to fire all those documents into the tender. And I was guilty of this myself. I worked for a company for a few years where I was responsible for tenders. And for a while we were doing that. We just had a big data bank built up with all this stuff, and we would fire it into every tender. And then after a couple, we were copping on that we were throwing stuff in that wasn't needed. You don't want to do that. We want to look at what they're looking for, and we're going to answer that specifically, right? So we take a methodology and approach to it that's built around maximizing our marks. You're going to have to look at pricing. So how are you going to price it? What awareness do you have of pricing around the place? We talked about this. It isn't, unless it's the lowest price job, it often isn't the lowest price that will win. It's good to have case studies that suit your tender. So examples of previous work, being able to describe the work that you did before that will impress the people assessing the tender, so that they can see that you're somebody who has the necessary knowledge and skills and ability to do what they're looking for. And good personnel profiles that impress. So this could be about you or somebody on your team, somebody that you're working with that's going to be key to the delivery of the project or delivery of the job. And then having a good personnel profile, even a good one-page profile for each person, be really important, right? So, excuse me. All right, folks. So, feel free to jump in at any time with a question or a comment. I know I'm rabbiting on here a lot. There's a lot of info here, and I don't want to be losing you too much. Yeah. So, when we're answering, right, so that's what we're going to look at now, is how do we answer the tender, right? We take account of the different buyer types. So the user, technical buyers, finance people, and procurement officers, right? So there will be different people who will be evaluating what it is that we're submitting. And so it makes it a little complicated and something that we need to think about. In terms of achieving maximum marks, because that's what we're trying to do, you look at a few different things, right? Is your document structured logically? So this is important. If you look at a tender document, they will lay out, first thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. When you answer the document, when you answer the tender, you should answer it according to the way it was asked in the tender. So whatever heading they used for a particular section that they want you to provide information on, you would use the same heading and do it in the same order as they laid out in the tender. That's very friendly towards the assessor or the person evaluating it, because they now can read what you are answering according to the way that they sent it out. And that's helpful to them, and it's a very friendly step. So it's good to do that. Don't make them go all over the place trying to see what it is that you're trying to say about what. Keep things under the heading that they were tendered under. Look at it and ask yourself, is your content easy to understand, right? When you read it, when you look at it, is it logical? Is it easy to understand? Are you answering the question, right? Is any statements that you're making about your company, about what you've done or what you can do or so on, can you back those up with evidence? So can you show examples or talk about examples of what you've done so that they can see that you're not simply just making statements, but that you're backing them up with examples of where you're coming from, why it is that you're saying the thing you're saying. And you check and see that you've answered the questions asked by addressing any specific points that were raised, right? So you go back over the questions or the sections of the tender document, and you make sure that you've answered everything that they've asked for. And this is giving you the best chance then of getting the highest number of marks possible. So how do we stand out? Well, we stand out by being technically competent, right? By addressing the technical requirements of the tender in detail. you have to communicate that in a reader-friendly way. And this is a really important part of the whole process as well, is if you think about it again from their point of view, the person receiving the tenders is getting, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 different, whatever number of tenders submitted to them. And they have to go through each one of those. And if they're reading ones that are all written the same, that's kind of boring for them. If they're reading ones that are badly written and haphazard, then that's not good for them either, because that's difficult for them to concentrate, and really, it's difficult for them then to award proper marks. So writing it in a good way is really important, in using common terminology for the business that you're in, avoiding management speak and too many, sort of modern high-end language, or words that are used in business. Like, it's try to keep it on a level that they will understand, and try to keep it said in a way or written in a way that you would read and think, yeah, this reads well. I understand the language is plain and simple and easy for me to understand. So that'd be important. And then it's important to engage them in having good case studies, good explanations of the methods that you use, and good details around your team, who your team are. Like I said, you should have, for you and for any key member, at least a 1-page profile written about you and any important team members that you have that would be helping to deliver or do the work, okay? Other important factors in this is highlighting for them the benefit of what they're going to get. So if you think about it, if you were dealing with a customer or talking to a customer, you would be impressing upon the customer the benefit for them of doing business with you, of using your service or of buying your products, right? Will you do that again here, right? What you're looking at is try and look at the gap between where the procurer is, where their company is, and where they want to go, right? What are they looking for? And if you can talk about it, write about it in that way, you can write about to the gap that they experience at the minute. So, by using you will be able to do the following, but in relation to the problem that they have. So what's the benefit that they're going to get from getting you to do it? And that's what you would try to write. So you base it around what they need, and you demonstrate your own skill and ability in doing this. So having a structured approach to writing the tender is important, and having a nice or good writing style that makes it plain and simple and easy for them to read, that's really important. So you're going to try and maximize your scores across the understanding of their requirements, the organization chart and team, your experience, your projects, and your case study and your methodology. And what I would be doing with that is, right, I would be summing that up in looking at it from, first of all, a selective approach. I would look at, where are my strengths? Where are we good? What are the things that we do really well? What background do we have? What specific expertise and experience can we show and highlight really well? And they're the bids that I would go for, the ones that match those elements of yourself. Because if you're in the game of tendering, it can be a thing that we get into the thing of just tendering all the time for everything without really reading what it is they're looking for and assessing, where are we in relation to that? Do we have a strong chance of winning this bid? If possible at all, if you can have more than yourself just doing it, that's great, because if you can bid together, you can put a strong document together in a short time. It's like, many hands make light work and all that, but it's also useful to have somebody, if it's at all possible, who could help you with it, because they can give you a little bit of perspective, right? a thing that a lot of companies won't have done necessarily, or business people or businesses will have, is being able to describe why it should be used. So what's really good about the thing that you do? I like to do this, like I was saying, from the point of view of what's the gap for the customer? What are they experiencing? And how can you fill that gap? So you should be able to look at what it is that typically a customer of yours would look for, what you do for them, and describe that job that you do for them. And you should have that in writing for yourself, because that's a bid or a pitch. And you'll want to be able to write that into the document. You'll want to be able to write that into your tender so that you can show why it is that they should be doing business with you, right? Selecting you, awarding you the points and the marks and so on, right? Very important, like I said, is to look for feedback. We always look for feedback because we want to see when we didn't get it, why didn't we get it? And the more feedback we can get, the better, as long as we then take the things that we're being told and use that in the next bid that we make. And then really useful is building a tender library. So from the things, for instance, when you build details about your team, right? Say profile on, or bio on yourself and anybody that you're working with or in your business that would be important for the delivery of the service or the products to the customer, right? You would have a bio for those, and you would put those into a little tender bank, and you have them there and they're done, and now they're done, right? Your technical details, technical expertise, you would have that done. Your case studies, previous work experience, previous work you've done, where it'll highlight where you're good and where you've gotten results. Write those up and keep those in the tender document. So that's in your tender library, right? So you're building up for yourself a batch of documentation and information that you would be able to then, when you read the tender document that's coming out, you can look and see, oh yeah, they're looking for bios. Okay, I've got bios. They want case studies on the following. Yeah, I've got 2 case studies written on that, so I can use those, right? It's helping you then when you go to do it, that you possibly could have half to 2/3 of it already sitting there. You might have to adapt it in some way. You'll certainly have to do some new stuff, right? You'll certainly have to bid and pitch for the specific job that's coming up. But a lot of the stuff you'll already have sitting in a library or in a bank that you can just draw on then when you need it. And that's very time-saving, very handy. It's an efficient way of working with it. So that's something that I would highly recommend that you do. So there's some of the do's, some of the don'ts, right? Don't go for every tender. Select the ones that you're best placed to go for. Yeah, well, okay. I mean, depending on the size of the business, but don't leave it to other people, just throwing it off to get other people to do it. If you have a business like that where you have some people working for you, it's a team effort. Tenders take a lot of time and effort, and if possible, if you have a few people around you, a few people is better than one. Another thing to think about is don't ignore the possibility of working with other companies. So this is where you form a consortia, right? You and somebody else form a joint bid for tenders. Now, I do this now. I have a company that I work with. It come and do similar to me, but in different sort of approach or in a little bit different field. We now tender together for jobs, and that gives us the combined strength of the 2 small businesses together, which makes us into still a small business, but a stronger business with a broader set of skills and background and case studies and so on. And that's very useful. 2 businesses of similar size, some synergies, get on well, easy to work together, that type of thing. And once you can do that, then that can be a really good way of doing it. And another thing where that's very useful is some of the tenders that come out will have a minimum criteria in terms of turnover. And on your own, you may not meet. Like there are jobs that I'm interested in where I haven't met the minimum turnover criteria. And that's one of the reasons why I looked for a partner in this. so that it would allow me with our combined turnover to work together for that. And that gets us over that hump. Yeah, that's a brilliant point, Andy. Yeah. So Andy's saying, so we've been advised is to see who's awarded the contract and introduce ourselves via email to them with the view to becoming a subcontractor. Yeah, that's a brilliant point as well. Now, I haven't done that, I have to say, but I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, because that could well be a winning move. And don't expect tender success to come easy, because it takes a lot of time and effort, and you don't win them all. The best I've seen, like 6 or 7 out of 10 is really good. Like 3 out of 10 isn't bad even, you know, 3, 4 out of 10, that's not bad. Because you're not going to get them all. You can see there's no relationship building here. And the other way I would think about it is, there is already, in the majority of cases, or, you know, in a lot of cases at least, there's already an incumbent. There's somebody there doing the job. And you are trying to unseat the incumbent in a lot of cases. And although the criteria is, of course, objective, you know, it's laid out, the incumbent will have an advantage in that they obviously know how to do the job, how to deliver. They're already there. They will have a working relationship built up over time. They're familiar with the value of the contract and so on. So they have a lot of advantages, even in terms of resubmitting their bid, you know, and tendering again. They have insights that we won't have just by simply they've been doing the job. And also the company will have the incentive to stay with them, at least from the point of view of they'll know whether or not they're capable of doing the job. And if they're capable of doing the job and doing it well, then they at least know that they've one supplier there that's good. So when you're doing a tender, it needs to be really well done. If you think about it from that point of view, that you're trying to unseat somebody, you have to write it really specifically towards what they're looking for, and write it well in order to have a chance, because you're trying to take, unless the incumbent isn't doing a great job and they're keen to change, then in any case in business, when we're trying to unseat an incumbent, you know, and when we're trying to win the business like that, then we have a job to do. And with tenders, it's no different. We still have a job. We have a big job to do when that's the case. So these are some of the things I would put in my tender library, right? Your org profile and chart, your account manager details, your staff details, methodologies used, innovations or unique type approaches, any case studies, referee and reference details, have a quality system written up, a health and safety policy, which you should have. A little tip for anybody who doesn't have a health and safety statement: if you go on to the website, besmart.ie, I'll put it in the chat. Very handy. Yeah, besmart.ie. If you put that in there, it will bring you through a series of questions that will help you to write a health and safety policy or statement for your business. And it's free. It's a website of the Health and Safety Authority. An environmental system. Now I have COVID policy in there, but in the last couple of months, it seems like the COVID policies are done away with. And insurance documentation. And you can put all that into a bank and have it there for yourself. And then that leads us to the presentation of your tender. So it's important that when you present the tender, that you present it well. In a lot of cases now, you'll upload the tender onto eTenders. You know, you'll answer through the eTenders section. And even in that case where you're using documents that you're making on your computer, then it's important, it's very nice if you have your company logo on the page, if you turn them into PDFs so they're easier to read for the people receiving them, have it nicely presented, have it nicely laid out, have it logically done. This is if we were doing them in folders and submitting a physical tender. We make them nice and colourful and well done. And you can do that as well with the documents that you submit. I would see companies there, they would have for themselves a set of tender documents built out into a nice, presentation system on a particular, with their logo, a nice page made, these type of things. And this presentation of it is very good because when you do it like that, it looks professional. It makes it easier then. So you've sent in a logical, well-written, structured tender that's well presented. You're making yourself very friendly towards the person that's reading and assessing what it is that you're submitting. And that won't do you any harm at all. You don't have to go over the top with it, but making it easy and simple and clear and nice for them to receive and read will definitely win you some friendship points. And that will be amenable then to them to really receive the information that you're providing them on the page, as opposed to them having to go through scattered looking document, or maybe a Word document that they're having to scroll through and it's a bit awkward to get through it, and so on. So in terms of the overall thing, right? I'm going to send Stephen a copy of the slides from the presentation deck, which may be useful. The couple of PDF documents that we talked about in terms of getting set up and using eTenders, switching over to eTenders to the new one if you've already been registered on the old one. And we've gone through, we've had a look at, say, procurement, public procurement from the procurement point of view, right? So what are the rules and regulations and laws and how does it all work in terms of the structure? We've looked at the eTender site, right? And what eTenders is. The switch over if you have to, getting onto it if you're new, the key elements of it. So the key elements of it being your company admin and your details, having your common procurement vocabulary. So you're having your CPV codes selected and saved, your alert switched on, right? Knowing then when you get the tender document that it's important to go to the tender document and get into the details of what it is that they're looking for, writing that out for yourself so you're clear on it, and then formulating your answer according to that in a structured, cohesive manner, and to really help yourself, having for yourself a tender bank built that you can draw on as you need it, right? And concentrating really then on the quality and way in which you submit the tender. So I'm going to send the information on to Stephen, like I said, and then he can send it out to you guys. And if you've questions or you need a little help getting registered on the thing or anything like that, if you go to Stephen and he sends it on to me, I'll be more than happy then to provide you with any little bits of help that you need, all right? So I think we're coming towards the end anyway. Are there any questions or comments or things that you'd like to bring up before we tidy up and go? No, it seems not. Okay, I'll take the silence as being okay. Well then, thank you very much for coming along. Thanks for bearing with it over the morning, because I know it's a lot of information and a lot of stuff in a short period of time. I hope it was okay for you, that it was you could follow it as much as you needed. And I wish you the best of luck, right? I hope you're successful with your tenders and it all goes really great. All right. Thank you.